surrogates for Vice President Kamala Harris, the presumptive Democratic nominee, busy campaigning today as vice presidential contenders stump from Pennsylvania to Michigan. All of this while former President Donald Trump's VP pick, Ohio Senator J.D. Vance, you know he's been facing scrutiny for those past comments discussing childless Americans and political leadership, among other things. We'll get to all that later. But let's begin with President Biden. He's in the news today proposing major reforms to the U.S. Supreme Court, usually a sleepy time in the summer. No longer for the court. They're in the spotlight. President Biden proposing term limits for justices and an enforceable code of conduct. The administration also proposing a constitutional amendment that dictates no immunity for crimes for a former president committed while in office. To discuss all of this, especially President Biden's latest agenda, Fin Gómez and Weijia Jiang join us now. Great to have both of you here. Weijia, I want to begin with you. Supreme Court reform. The president seems adamant about doing this. The White House throwing a lot of weight behind it politically. But what's the real talk among your sources about what's possible at this point?
Robert, all you have to do is look at what's required to reform any of these measures that the president is putting forth to understand, especially our viewers should know this as well, that it is highly unlikely that any of them would pass because it would require congressional action, either in the form of legislation or ratifying the Constitution. So the president does not have any kind of unilateral authority to do this, and the White House is well aware of that. But that doesn't mean that this effort isn't useful to Biden and, frankly, Vice President Harris, who also issued a statement to say that she supported the president's plan because they can use this to really gin up enthusiasm and energy among their base, which has already had questions about the current state of the court. And so even though it is unlikely, in fact, the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, said that this would be dead on arrival in the House, we should expect them to push this from now until November to point out their argument that it is corrupt, that it needs to be reformed, and that, you know, a Harris administration would push for that even more. But, Robert, as you very well know, in terms of Congress passing this, you know, it's really not a reality.
We just stay with us. Fin Gómez here at the table with us. Fin, the president at the LBJ Library. I don't know. Have you been there? I've been there as a reporter. Austin, Texas, great city, but a lot of history.
I've actually never been there. Yeah, actually.
It's near UT,
yeah.
And so much history with LBJ. His own decision, March 1968, to not seek the Democratic nomination. President Biden going there today. Andrew Jiang, who I sat down with in Atlanta a few months ago, the former ambassador for Jimmy Carter, civil rights leader. He'll be there introducing the president. What do you make of this moment for President Biden?
It's an historical and crucial moment for President Biden. I think the parallels that you just talked about, going back to the 1968 election, where it was seen as the selfless act by LBJ not to run in that very heated political cycle. You see a lot of that mirrored now, and I'm sure you yourself have some great assessment on that as well. You do have the historical archival mind, Bob.
Well, it's just interesting to see President Biden out there. And Weijia, it's notable that he's out at a presidential library. He's not just at some rally or some random site. He's at a presidential library. What do you make of it?
Yeah, this is not necessarily a campaign event, even though you could say the lines are blurred for all the White House events. But this is an official event in the capacity of President of the United States. And so he is continuing the argument, much of what we saw from the Oval Office, which you can't get more presidential than that, Robert, about, you know, his belief that there is a threat to democracy here. And so that is why he is pushing for exactly what you're seeing on the screen. No immunity for crimes for a former president committed in office, the term limits and the code of conduct that is enforceable, we should point out, which is what he is pushing for. So it is certainly relevant, important that he chose this space to deliver these remarks.
Well, and Fin, when LBJ left in 1968, he had to kind of cede the political ground to his vice president, who eventually became the nominee, Hubert Humphrey. Now Vice President Harris is in this moment. She needs to pick a running mate as the president continues with his own agenda, working with the vice president on policy, but she has to choose a running mate in the campaign. We saw Gretchen Whitmer at the top of the show on CBS Mornings talking about her latest book, True Gretch. I've heard she's not at the top of the list. Who is at the top of the list based on your latest conversations with the Harris campaign?
Yeah, it's a little bit like when you look at the Veep stakes, and again, like going back to the 1968 model, the president at that time was clearing the lane for the best advantage that the party has, and I think right now that is at the top of the assessment list, if you will, for the Harris campaign.
What are you hearing?
Like essentially, he's like, okay, so it's still that Whitmer, interestingly enough, is still on the list. Even though what she said this morning, I know you have some good sources there also, but she's still on the list. Andy Bashir is still on the list, being told. Roy Cooper, Josh Shapiro, and of course Mark Kelly, the Arizona senator that we have heard a lot about in recent days, especially because of his bio. Especially he comes from a battleground state. We've been hearing very similar things about Josh Shapiro as well. But right now they're looking to assess to get the best possible team. They're telling me to help they think defeat Trump, Vance. They feel they're in a good spot right now. They have the momentum, not only in money, but also with just the unity you're seeing across the board when it comes to the Democratic Party. They feel they have the momentum right now and that they can strike. Also, interestingly enough, Bob, I just want to mention this very quickly.
Please.
I spoke to someone from from Harris world. I got to get used to that. Same world. I got to get used to that. But the language, right, and from the Harris campaign world, who says we've been hearing a lot about this, the Trump and Vance are weird from Vice President Harris, from her allies, from surrogates, and that was early on a tactic they utilized because they felt that that the Trump campaign did not do a good job of defining J.D. Vance, so they saw an opening, almost Trumpian in this tactic by defining him. They saw they had the oppo on him, they did the vetting on him, and they were ready. And so I think by issuing that, and especially early on, it's helped define him so far, and it's going to be you've seen already Vance and the campaign have some struggles in sort of defeating that sense of him being weird, for lack of a better description.
And Weijia, we have a minute left. What's your latest reporting on the VP search and how Democrats you've spoken with are talking about it?
Well, they're well aware that they have to be able to fill whatever it is that Joe Biden is leaving behind. And so, sources say she has to choose somebody that can ensure that those people who wanted to vote for Joe Biden are still going to come along and then some. So something that she is not. I mean, this is a former DA of San Francisco. The Trump-Vance team already painting her as the most progressive, radical in their words, presidential nominee ever. And so perhaps a more moderate figure would fit the bill. When you look at these people, there are a lot of those that could do the job. But again, who is going to balance her out in a way that can really be a winning ticket? Nobody really knows, Robert, except for Vice President Harris and probably Doug Emhoff, her husband.
I don't know. I'm not sure Doug's read in. We'll have to do some reporting on that. Weijia Jiang and Finn Gómez, thanks so much for your reporting and time.